Growing up should be about exploring and finding out who you are. But for young carers who have to look after a loved one, it's a little more tricky. Having to care for someone can often mean missing school or having to bail on friends. The statistics show us that 27% of young carers aged between 11 and 15 do just that. It can put their childhood on the back burner. By definition, a young carer is someone under the age of 18 who looks after or intends to look after a family member or friend who has a physical or mental health condition or misuses drugs or alcohol. They could be looking after a sibling with a disability. There are 800,000 young people aged between 5 and 17 in the UK today with one of these such responsibilities. It's taken a long time to get to where we are now. The research began over 20 years ago.
I first thought about children and families that might be caring when I was asked to do a small piece of research by Winchester City Council, looking at the impacts that having a disabled sibling may have on brothers and sisters.
That's Jenny Frank, MBE, who, in the early 90s, through her own family experiences, realised that young people could be affected by care responsibilities at home. Produced by the Useful Media Company, with funding from the Audio Content Fund, this is Are You Aware We Care? Episode 4. You've just heard Jenny, who we caught up with over FaceTime at the height of the pandemic. She was talking about the moment she began her research. But who sparked the idea to look further into the needs of some incredible young people who came to be known as young carers?
I have a daughter with a learning disability, and at our annual review, a far-sighted social worker asked how the rest of the family were. So often the focus is on the person that's needing the care, and the impact on the family and the caring responsibilities of the family are often invisible or forgotten. The small piece of research was published in 1995, and there was a small piece of funding found by Hampshire County Council, because having spoken to these young people who opened their hearts to me, I felt that they needed support. So a small piece of money was found to start one of the first young carer projects in the country, which was Winchester Young Carers.
We'll meet one of the first ever young carers project workers later in the programme. But just how pioneering was the first ever project?
It was pioneering for Hampshire, but at the same time, Professor Saul Becker was undertaking a piece of work in Nottingham. So there were two emerging areas of research that were happening at the same time across the country. It was groundbreaking work, and the young people were just amazing in opening their hearts, and it gathered a lot of media interest, which then helped it to grow across the rest of the country. Most of them were saying, perhaps I'm the only one, there can't be anybody else like me. Or conversely, they were saying, are there other people out there like me? Because I feel I must be the only one. Which was one of the reasons why we decided that there was a need to start a group where they could meet one another, share common feelings, and get the extra support that they needed. And this was out of the back of the publication called Couldn't Care More, because they did care so much, and that was published by the Children's Society in 1995.
A few years after the initial research was conducted in Hampshire and Nottingham, the fledgling Young Carers group began.
We started very small, and the young people that we got together, Hampshire's a very rural area, and Winchester and district is also very rural. So we would go and meet, and we started by meeting and doing some group work at YMCA Fairthorne Manor. And we would pick the children up because often their parents were unable to drive them to venues if their parent was ill. And then we would do activities at YMCA Fairthorne Manor. But what it would do, it would give them an informal opportunity to know that they're not alone and that they could talk to us, but also share common experiences with each other. For so many, the sense of isolation was enormous. Often not sharing it with their friends or school friends or their teachers. And so they were very hidden. So to finally have the chance to come together as a group was really reassuring for them.
Ben Hogbin, fresh out of university, tells us how he became involved as the first project worker and about how he came to a surprise realisation about his own childhood.
This was back in 2005 and I was just looking for jobs. It was my mum actually that put a job advert in the newspaper back in the day when adverts in the back of newspapers, and there was this role for an activities and support coordinator at Winchester and District Young Carers. I'd been working with young people in residential homes, in secure units, whilst at university. So I had experience working with that age group. I went to the interview and came out of the interview and realised that actually I had been a young carer growing up myself. So it was a bit of a light bulb moment for me in the sense that growing up caring for my sister who had physical disability and learning disability, and that my sister and myself growing up were actually young carers, but the term young carer wasn't really around, wasn't known, and I'd certainly not become aware of it until actually going to this job interview. Started the role working doing the activities side of things, running activities, respite activities for young carers, giving them the opportunity to meet other young carers, have time out from their caring role. I was only supposed to stay there for a year. It was just kind of a stepping stone, but 15 years on and I'm still, I now manage the project and have done for the last 10 years. So it's been hugely rewarding in the sense that there's not many roles and jobs where you can see short-term impacts, but the long-term impacts of a young person, me becoming aware of a young person at sort of the age of 8 and then helping them through their childhood and into their teens, and then getting to a point where they're then off to further education, starting their families and things. So it's been hugely rewarding in that sense, knowing that the work projects do have a huge impact on a young person. And I certainly know that if I'd had the support and guidance, then perhaps some of the worries, concerns I had growing up caring for my sister, they would have probably been alleviated a lot earlier on, and I wouldn't necessarily have been carrying those worries or concerns around. I never knew that they were worries or concerns at the time, but I think in hindsight there's quite a heavy burden sometimes on young people without them really knowing it. My family was my family and that was normal, but I did know that other families didn't necessarily have the worries or concerns perhaps that we did. A lot of time, I remember when I was younger, I'd spent in and out of hospital with my sister's appointments, which were seemingly weekly, and just going into that environment, in a hospital environment, was normal for me. Looking back now, that's probably where I have my perhaps phobia around going into hospitals, because it was never really, although there'd be checkups, there'd be long periods of times where my sister would be very ill, and there was the unknown as to what was going to happen, the uncertainty. So I think whilst I knew nothing different, there were times where you did wonder, is everyone else like this? I knew my friends didn't necessarily have those concerns, but they were equally supportive, but it wasn't explicitly identified at all that you're a young carer as it is now. I did have supportive parents and really supportive friends, but nowhere near to the level of kind of support of what's out there with local projects now, and that greater understanding of the needs of individuals.
We wondered whether there was an epiphany moment when Ben realised what his role at home had been.
I think I do remember getting home and having a conversation with my mum, saying, I've been a young carer growing up. My mum kind of knew that, and I think in past conversations I've had with her, there were occasions where there were groups that my mum had said, do I want to go, like sibling groups. So if you were caring for a sibling with a long-term illness or disability, there were sibling groups. There weren't young carer projects as such, but there were certainly groups that you could go to. And my mum did say, I did ask if you wanted to go to any of them, but because I had other interests and stuff, it wasn't something that I'd wanted to explore. Neither did my sister, and I think my sister was a bit younger, so perhaps wouldn't necessarily have understood so much. But I think in the immediate, it was a kind of a relief that there is a young carers project for young people that have experienced and are experiencing similar things to me. But I don't think it's really it's really been until the last few years of really bedding in the exploration program that we run that I realised just how much of an impact caring did have on me growing up. I mean, I've worked in this sector, in the voluntary sector, with young carers for 15 years, and I still have the same enthusiasm and passion for making a difference as I did when I back on the first day. And I think that's because of the background of growing up as a young carer, known full well that actually with a little bit of support and guidance, your caring role shouldn't be something that holds you back. It should be something that you'd be extremely proud of, and something that you can kind of take forward and use going forward, whether that is explicitly working for a young carers project or just flying the flag for young carers and young adult carers and adult carers.
Compared to today, knowledge about young carers 15 or even 30 years ago was scarce. And as Ben told us, growing up as a young carer with all those worries and pressures was just considered normal. Here again is Jenny Frank.
Often they didn't realise that what they were doing was caring. They just saw it as a part of normal everyday life. And also, at the beginning, many were afraid to share their stories because they were worried that if they didn't get it right, or if somebody found out that their parents might then have to go into residential care, and the parents were equally worried that because their children were playing a significant caring role, that their children might be taken into care. I have to say that this was over 30 years ago, and it is very pleasing to know that we've moved on. And I hope that no young people, no young carers would feel that way now and would feel able to come forwards for help.
Anyone, no matter what their age or strength might be, needs and is entitled to support. Young people need a little more help than others and have often been overlooked when care packages are planned. How should the support work?
There's sort of two sides to the support. There's the support for the young person so that they're able to have a break, meet one another, learn new skills, and just be part of a project. But the other side is to make sure that their caring role is reduced so it doesn't impact on them as a child. So very much now, there is the whole family approach. So when there's somebody in the family that's ill or disabled, be it a son or a daughter or a parent, the assessment needs to take into account the needs of the whole family so that the correct support is put into the family home so that the child can still care in a loving way, but not to the detriment of their own well-being, their own mental health, or their own attendance at school.
Many young carers find school a place of safety and a chance to escape their responsibilities at home. Schools are often the first place where a young person with a care role is identified.
A lot of young carers can be present in school, but their minds might be elsewhere, and they might be worrying about the person that they're caring at home. And that shouldn't be, really. That's not right. They need to be able to get their education as much as the person sitting next to them. And happily now, there are strong schools programs throughout the country where schools and teachers and support staff have been trained to recognise which child might be a young carer and to put that support in for them.
In 2009, Jenny was awarded the MBE for her services to young carers, but of course, her huge heart does not see this as the standout moment of her career. We asked her what she saw as her biggest achievements.
I think the first one was being privileged to enable young carers to have a voice. And always it's their voices that count. And we've done that in a number of ways, in straightforward consultations, but also in setting up the Young Carers Festival. But the other biggest achievement, very much with the voices of the young people and the young people beside me, is going to meet government ministers way back in 2012, 2013, which resulted in the passing of the Care Act in 2014, which included meeting the needs of young carers and the whole family approach. The fundamental change was that previously, if there was an adult with an illness or disability, the assessment would be undertaken by adult social care. And not always was the child needs taken into consideration. After the piece of legislation, both the legislation and the guidance asked that adult social care and children's services should work together and coordinate assessments so that they looked again at the needs of the whole family, so that young carers didn't fall through the gap and were recognised for their contribution to the family, but also when it was impacting on them, that services should be put in to reduce the impact on them. So it was a joining up of adult services and children's services that was the huge achievement for young carers.
In 1999, information about young carers was just starting to surface. So in an attempt to see if there were similarities across the country, in the summer of that year, a unique event was born.
Peter Cooper from YMCA Fairthorne Manor at the time and myself at the Children's Society, we'd been running small group activities at Fairthorne Manor for young carers. And we wondered if young carers living in Yorkshire or Cornwall or Birmingham were experiencing the same issues or if they might be different. So we thought that we would have a consultation weekend to get, let's say, 100 young carers together to see if the issues were the same across the country.
Here's Peter Cooper.
I had seen a lot of this and it was very adult-led stuff, invite young people to a conference, to participate in a conference. And I thought, so Jenny, she needed her evidence and she needed to run a conference. And she said, we need to try and get as many people as possible, perhaps, as much as 100. And the more I listened, I thought, do you know what, these kids do enough adult stuff in their lives. Let's give them a weekend of childhood, and if there's an opportunity to talk to them at the same time, then great, that can be our participation bit, So I wasn't prepared to run a conference for 100, and I boastfully said, we can cope with 500, which was a bit of a lie because our capacity was about 300. And on the eve of the festival, 649 are booked. And the rest is history.
That our thoughts were correct and that no matter where you live, the feelings and the impact were the same. And so pretty rapidly we decided that the festival was an excellent way of reaching these young people so that their voices could influence change, but also to give them a fun weekend. And so Young Carers Festival annually was born.
What resulted from that weekend was actually a short documentary made by Meridian at the time, and that was actually published to all schools nationally, I think. And it was these young people, just for the first time that I can recall, being asked what their lives were like. And most of them were sort of saying, well, it's what we do. It's it's not extraordinary. It's our situation. But the most powerful thing I heard was from the two older young people present who were about to they're in that transition of life between childhood and adulthood. And one of them wanted to go to university, and he had the ability to go to university. He's a clever lad, And he said, I need to do this for myself, but how do I leave my family? And that was just kind of amazed me about, the opportunities potentially being denied. But he was adamant, I need to do this for myself, but how do I leave? And what will happen when I'm gone? And 17, 18-year-old young woman was there as well. And she just said, I'm proud of myself. And I was just stunned by her self-awareness. She said, I've been criticised all my life because I've never handed in my homework on time. I've never done this. It's just been complete criticism at every possible opportunity. I haven't got any qualifications. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm proud of what I've done. When we ran that first Young Carers Festival, and a young lad got out the minibus and he turned to his leaders. There was 10 kids got out after a day travelling from wherever they were, shattered, traffic jams, whatever, and he got out the minibus and he turned on his leaders and he shouted at them. He said, you told me that this was about young carers and, it would only be young carers. And he pointed out across the field where the masses were gathering and he said, and who the heck are that lot? And collectively all the adults around said, yep, them too. And for that kid, his first difficulty of the day was understanding there was 10 others in the minibus who were doing the same. Who are these other people? He did only just got over that there was 10 more, and to see another 650 running around or whatever it was at that time was, so I think that was just one of those standout moments. It just floored me.
The lump in my throat every year when I see these young people come along, and it's not the Children's Society Festival or the YMCA's festival, it's the young people's. They've made it their own. If that's it's grown with them, and their voices have made it very special. And I suppose also the fact that their voices, because we invite politicians to come as guests to the festival, the Children's Commissioner, their voices have been heard in large numbers. Most years it's 1,500 young people there having a big loud say about what they want changed for them and their families. And so I think, that's the high point, really, seeing them own the festival and have a voice.
From that field, less than a mile behind where we're sitting now, so much information has come out and has been channeled through to government. And you can put your finger on 3 bits of legislation which have changed. And the original voices came from that, from the heart of the festival. And fortunately, it's been championed up into government. And it has actually changed the law, and that's just such a fantastic legacy.
The Young Carers Festival is, and always has been, a place to learn about young carers. A chance to learn about their needs and their ideas about what it means to them to be a young carer. It's a weekend where some of the wisest voices can be heard.
One of the big things that I learnt from them is actually not to take away their right to be a carer for their loved ones. So you could perceive that we need to change the world so much that they don't have to do this. But actually, many of them wanted to. They wanted to be the one who cared for their loved ones. They didn't necessarily, it wasn't about providing somebody else always to do that job. So I learned that quite early on, because you could just say, right, let's just solve this completely. You don't have to do this. You need to do this, and many didn't. And again, it's one of these things where it's different for all. Everyone's unique. But many wanted to be there with their families. They didn't want just anybody else turning up doing the care of their families. But what they consistently wanted was some recognition of what they were doing and some support to fill in the gaps, not criticism.
The short weekend gives young carers the chance to explore who they are, to grow and to share their experiences and to influence change. Each year is accompanied by a theme song, and none suit the feeling behind the event more than this one. I've had the time of my life.
Now I had the time of my life. No, I never felt like this before. Yes, I swear it's a truth, and I owe it all to you.
'Cause I had the time of my life, and I owe it all to you.
I love like the atmosphere. It's so relaxed.
I struggle from time to time. It gets very stressful. It's just tough on your mind.
It's stressful, but it's like very nice knowing that you're helping people who you love.
The official definition of a young carer is a person under 18 who provides or intends to provide care for another person. We were not born young carers. Something in our lives changed, which means we became young carers. And as such, we were forced to grow up early and miss out on opportunities other children our age might have, just because we care for the people we love. The Young Carers Festival has been providing a single weekend where we can be our age. A weekend where for just a moment we can forget our responsibilities at home and experience the childhood we might not have had otherwise. The people who work behind the scenes to make the festival what it is are incredible. Thank you for changing the lives of young people for the better and helping us all create unforgettable memories that will stay with us forever.
Surprised because I didn't know I was a young carer at first.
Overwhelming, but I've had it for so many years now. It's kind of part of everyday life.
It just gives you a bit of responsibility.
It's really hectic at my house, so I'm running around cleaning up after everyone and trying to make sure everything gets done. And obviously here is kind of a break from all of that.
If you're a young carer, don't be scared to stand up. You're just doing something great for your family.
Everyone's really happy and cheerful, and it's really nice.
I feel like that it's good to have a break, and it's amazing how I could just step away and have a breath. And it feels good because I'm giving my mum a break.
Sometimes I get like upset and break down, but I've learned that it's okay to cry.
We just hang out with friends, like it's really cool. This is my first break.
This is your first break in how long?
Since I was born. I've got so many friends that take their life for granted and that, oh, we're going to go on this holiday this year. And I'm like, oh, great. That's great for you. Good. I could happily take that.
24,449 young carers exactly have stood in this field in Hampshire to enjoy this wonderful experience, which is YCF.
It's amazing. I'm really thankful to everyone who's turned up to make part in everything. Really grateful for all the staff.
Had the time of my life. No, I never felt this way before. Yes, I swear it's a truth, and I'll
It makes me feel like really grown up. At the same, I still want to be a kid.
The time to relax, to chill, hang out with friends, and just stay positive.
I don't reckon anybody here should be nervous.
I had such a good time here.
It means you get a massive break. It means you get to meet new people, and it means you know that you're not alone.
In episode 5, we meet a young carer who knows all too well about the pressures of family life and the sacrifice of giving up something they love.
Of all the pressures I had at the time, I had to choose one or the other, and I had to choose my family and my mum over the sport and the passion I had.
Next week, we meet Alicia, a young politician and young carer. To find out more about young carers, or if you need help, go to youngcarer.com.